Right, this is just an update on COVID-19 from what I've just been looking into, so you're going to have to bear with me. I'm going to have to piece this together, but from what I've been reading and researching on is this. Late November, there was a report of a virus in Wuhan. December 15th, a trade deal was signed, which is classed and deemed as phase 1, between China and America. 6 weeks later, a trade truce was signed with an out clause, a very clever out clause, which in this out clause stated on the trade bill that if there was any form or act of God or pandemic, then they wouldn't have to fulfill their trade deal with the US or Britain. Within days of this, an outbreak of the coronavirus and a pandemic started. A coincidence? I think not. In essence, the Chinese knew this was running around for 6 weeks previous to this trade bill. This is criminal. And basically they couldn't maintain the outbreak of this virus. How they insisted with having this out clause in the contract is and has never been seen before. Just bear with me a moment. The World Health Organization hasn't held China responsible. By rights, the World Health Organization should also be held to account. They have these fail-safes put in place to protect, so-called protect you, me, and anyone else in this world, which in this case have totally failed. I spoke briefly on this and we've been left to pick up the pieces. This is an act of biological warfare, quoted by the Americans. The Americans and the British, we have come out with statements reporting to the people that obviously this is just a flu. So intelligence agencies around the world must have known what was going on. You don't do a trade deal of $260 billion without looking into the current economy of countries and what's going on in that country to have such a big trade deal with. But this was sat on for 6 weeks with no one letting on or telling anyone about what was happening. But at the same time, Korea had shut itself down and was ordered to start testing. So when you start breaking it down to look at other sides of this, I started to look at the economy of China. The economy of China is 17% of the GDP of the world. GDP standing for the gross domestic product of the world. So it has the most amount of money to throw around in the world. Now, the allies of China is Iran and Russia. These are some of the biggest continents in the world, other than the States, the superpowers. Now, in with this, you're looking at 5G, about they're trying to basically be the next big superpower, which is China. Now, How it fits in, I'm going to have to do another video about, but it's all attached. But what I do know is, out of this coronavirus, the vaccine is the punchline, is the joke. Because early on in this outbreak, there was a report from an Israeli government minister quoting that they're miles ahead of producing a vaccine. From 2016, a scientific institute in Israel was connected, obviously, to a government body, which was found and proven to be testing coronavirus to use its new technology that they had been funded by the Chinese and the Russians to test out, obviously, all their new kit in the labs. And then you start looking elsewhere in the world. Denmark is starting to say that it's going to be a mandatory thing that every single one of us is going to have an injection vaccine from this, which in essence is fascism. In no other shape or form, it is clear fascism. But who knows what is in this vaccine? I don't, you don't, still the lead scientists don't. But the weirdest part about this is, in 1980, drug companies were given immunity from prosecution from vaccines, but yet in the States and other countries, vaccine courts have been set up and have paid out over $42 billion in whatever currencies that they're using elsewhere in these other countries. If this doesn't alarm bells to you, it certainly screams alarm bells to me, because all of this is starting to piece together that when you're starting to come out of the EU and people are losing trade deals, and you're trying to set up new trade deals, and this is like I've said, a form of a biological attack. And it's funny that China, Russia and Israel and Iran, they're all allies, which leaves the States and us against these. Now, there's everything I've written on these bits of paper you can go and do and read and research through world media, through trade deals, through what you see and hear on the TV. This is not me making this up. But isn't it funny how it all seems to connect? When you start to break past the initial scare tactic of coronavirus, there's always a sinister plan behind this. Now, I will update this video once I've done more research later tonight, probably early on tomorrow. But 5G does fit into this, and people are trying to buy up all the stocks and all the shares for 5G. Now, everything is all starting to piece itself together, and all I know is if no one's being held to blame and yet people are dying, it seems that this is some form of war that's about to start. Like, I've had people comment on my YouTube account saying, stick to your day job, blah blah blah. But the funny thing about it is, the more I look into this, the more people fuel me to look into this, the more this is making sense. Yeah, that this isn't just coincidence. COVID-19 is no coincidence. These trade deals being put in place previous to this is no coincidence with these outlaws. The outbreak breaking the trade deal. What's the odds of that, calling it an act of God? And if you know anything about when they use the word and phrase act of God, you cannot claim or sue or point a finger at anyone or blame anyone. It's like a tornado. You can't claim anything if a tornado smashes your house down or kills someone. It's an act of God or a pandemic. It's ironic and by far too coincidental for it to be unplanned or by chance. So, like I said, I've said all along that this is some form of an attack. The alliances that the Chinese have against us and the Americans far outweighs ours. Be safe, keep your eyes open, and we should all stick together and do your research. Good night, and God bless.